You again for coming back and sitting so nicely and so quietly. I think we had an amazing panel and the programs sound fantastic, and I'm definitely going to be looking up many of them. But now it is my very distinct pleasure to introduce to you a woman whom I have admired for a very long time. She is a model officer and someone whom is an amazing role model for young women today, especially young women in uniform like my daughter Megan. She is passionate about soldiers and their families. She's dedicated almost 30 years of her life to their health and well-being. She's a terrific wife. She's a devoted mom and a very loving daughter. Please join me in welcoming our 43rd Surgeon General of the United States Army, Lieutenant General Patricia Horho.
Patty, thank you very much for that introduction, and I validate it with my husband whether or not I was a good wife or not, so thank you. Mrs. Dempsey, Mrs. Odierno, and everybody that's here today, thank you very, very much. What I want to do is actually take a minute to take you on a journey that we've been taking across the Army and across Army medicine, and then the actions that we've taken. So if I could just ask for the lights, please.
Where were you when the world stopped turning that September day?
11 years, 1 month, 12 days, 1 hour, and about 20 minutes ago, I knew exactly where I was. This is when our lives, all of our lives changed. The world as we knew it changed forever. What did you just feel hearing that song and viewing that video? Did you feel anger, sadness, anxiety, fear? Take a moment to notice how your body reacted. Your palms may be sweaty, your heart may be beating a little bit faster, and maybe you're feeling a little nervous. You just experienced both the physical and the psychological responses to the memory of a tragic event. Something that happened over 11 years ago immediately evokes the same emotion as it did back then. Is it real? Is it in your head? And certainly it does begin there. It begins deep in your brain, in the area just above your spinal cord, in the area of the brain that controls things like breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. It's part of the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, you can think of it as an automatic nervous system. It's controlled largely below the level of consciousness. This is where your fight or your flight responses come from. Watching that video of 9/11 triggered a chemical and electrical cascade that made your heart beat faster, your breathing to quicken, and your blood pressure to rise. It also sent information to your frontal lobe to trigger an emotion. For most of history, anything we could not see, we did not believe. Not only that, we often ostracized those with conditions that we couldn't understand. Most conditions of the brain fell in that category. Today, science provides an understanding of many invisible medical mysteries, blurring the line between mental and physical. Recent scientific research has discovered that in mild traumatic brain injury, shearing forces stretch the nerve bundles of the brain, directly impacting major neurologic pathways that can lead to both psychological and cognitive impairments. Our neuroscientists can now visualize this activity with electric impulse mapping and brain imaging, and we're actually having this capability right now in Afghanistan. This isn't an abstract hypothesis, it's science and it's real. Lights, please.
Big bid, 25 minutes. I'm gonna need the chair over here. Here we go, big bid.
Where were they when their world stopped turning? For many of our nation's sons and daughters, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have endured more than 11 years of war, it was fighting somewhere in Iraq or Afghanistan. It was out on patrol, back on a forward operating base, or manning a checkpoint. That's when their world stopped turning. And the emotions that they felt deployed can be triggered now over and over again, and they're just as real as the emotions that you felt a moment ago. Is that real? Was it real for you? Yes, it's real. In conflicts past, when we didn't understand the links between mental and physical injury and illness, often the default responses was that it was all in your head. Was that right? I'd submit yes it was, but it was also wrong. Right was that it is in our head. It's deep in our brains. Wrong was that the inference that it wasn't real. The memories, the emotions, and the experiences our troop bring home are real. We understand that now. The psychological responses to the trauma that they've endured are based on real biological responses from deep within our brains. This is true not only for our soldiers, but for their families as well. We have had over 80% of our service members that have been diagnosed with PTSD have actually been healed and returned to active duty. Lights, please.
Hey, Mom. I'm in the hospital. I don't know where the hell I am. I'm in a hospital somewhere. Yeah, I got hit by an IED today.
Okay. What's wrong? How are you?
I'm not too bad considering the way the vehicle looked.
Where was that mother when her world stopped turning? When that call comes, every wife, every husband, every mother, every father, and every child remembers exactly where they were. This is bigger than the soldier, and it isn't an isolated event. The news and the emotion that news brings sends a shock wave through our units, through our families, our friends, and our communities. Lights, please.
Where today 3 U.S. Marines were killed.
As we've been reporting, there was an intense battle in Iraq Sunday after guerrilla fighters ambushed 2 U.S. convoys.
When an Afghan police officer believed to be a Taliban infiltrator opened fire.
Released the nationalities pending notification of the next of kin.
A suicide bomber drove an explosive-laden car at the entrance of a U.S. military airfield.
For families back home, the 24/7 stream of news has them hypervigilant, jumping at the ring of a phone or the slamming of a car door, and running to the computer or smartphone to check Facebook, email, or trying to Skype, anxious to hear that their loved one is okay. For the families of the estimated 2.6 million service members who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan since 2001, the constant uncertainty compounds the normal stresses of daily life. Lights, please.
We get scared. There's a lot of nights when we lay in bed, you get that knot in your stomach. You get that thing that you can't describe, and a lot of times later you find out that there was a really hair-raising mission that your spouse was on.
I have a very hard time sleeping at nighttime. The whole deployment, we can say.
Sometimes the unsung heroes are the family members that have kept the family going while their service member has deployed.
This is deployment number 7.
He's keep on missing my birthday.
So he missed Patrick's 2nd birthday and Daphne's 1st birthday. We've been married for almost 5 years and he's only been home for 1 anniversary. Valentine's Day.
When I signed that dotted line, I knew exactly what was I getting into, but I didn't realize it was going to be this difficult.
Seeing Daphne walk for the first time.
Going into an empty bedroom is the hardest thing.
You know, taking your kids to that Christmas concert again by yourself, another Christmas alone.
Hated Christmas this year. I didn't want to do Christmas this year.
So you find an outlet. You don't let them know that the stress gets to you.
Did you all feel the emotions in those words? Not just the words, but the emotions. Fear, anxiety, loneliness, and regret. Yet also a remarkable sense of pride. That's our military families. So going back to the question, are these feelings real? I think all of us now realize that they are. Not only are their psychological responses normal, the physical responses are hardwired in our brains. Today, we recognize and validate those feelings, the first step forward towards treatment and healing. As the Army Surgeon General, it's my responsibility to make psychological health real, to overcome the stigma, and to provide evidence-based prevention, screening, treatment, and rehabilitation. Our response has been robust, but before I go into the details of what we've been doing over the last several years, there's a subject that I am compelled to speak to you about and to address. Lights, please.
Ben was lower than low and basically just came clean with his dad.
I heard him say it may be easier if I just died. Then he wouldn't have to deal with this. I said, Ben, there's a little girl at home that depends on you. Don't you ever give in. You owe it to your little girl. Don't ever give in.
Oh. And he's right. I mean, I had a job. It was more important than me. But I was so self-consumed in what I was going through. So he was just being a good dad once again, challenging me, get me on the right path, and that's what I focused on was getting back to my job as a dad and husband, you know.
Our most difficult and frustrating and heart-wrenching challenge we face today is suicide. So far this year, 312 soldiers have taken their lives. Soldiers who raised their hand to join an institution that is greater than themselves and to defend our nation. Many joined to prove themselves, maybe to move forward with their lives, or maybe they just wanted to fight for our nation. Even one suicide is one suicide too many. Our Army is committed to doing everything in its power to solve this tragedy. I believe the solution is multifaceted, but at the core is soldier and family resiliency and social support from peers, families, units, and communities. We don't have all the answers, but in collaboration with academia, public and private institutions, other federal agencies, we continue to search for better, more effective prevention, screening, and intervention options. We have to, for our Army and for our nation. We do know that to lower the risk of suicide, one has to live life and pride with purpose to be part of a larger community. Our goal is to strengthen soldiers and their families, enhance communities, and restore lives to an individual's highest potential. This is a national issue. With almost 30,000 suicides in 2010, this is a national issue. So how do we restore the lives? How do we get people to live life to the very fullest and the best health possible? Where does health happen? I mean psychological health, physical health, family health, unit health, and community health. Where does it happen? You might think, as the Army Surgeon General, that I would say it happens in my hospitals and in my clinics. So let's take a look. This white line that you see represents a year in the life of our patients. The blue dot represents 5 20-minute outpatient visits, the average number of visits per soldier per year. We have about 100 minutes a year. How much health is going on there? Healthcare, to be sure, and we have, I think, the best internationally renowned healthcare system. But what about health? From the patient's perspective, there are more than 500,000 minutes in a year. Actually, 525,500 minutes is what you have left in the year if you go see a doctor 5 times a year. Let's overlay our 100 minutes of direct influence. Is this amount of fluence that we have? How about this? No, it's actually this. And it's not an eye test for the people in the back row, but we're going to help you see it, so we're going to put an arrow there. So I ask again, where does health happen? How do we address the 99.9% of patients' lives that are outside our hospitals and clinics to improve health? So what's happening in that time? The time I'm going to call the life space. This green circle represents time at work and school. How does that influence your health? How do we impact that part of the life space? This yellow circle represents family and personal time. What about our family and friends? What influence do they have on health? How do we support them? The remaining white space is the circle is sleep. Current science tells us that adequate sleep is linked to physical and psychological health and healing. The value of restorative sleep cannot be overstated. Finally, this circle represents social media and the internet. They are the primary communication vehicles for many of our soldiers and our families. If we're going to influence health, where should we provide that information? It's not enough to wait for patients to come to us. We need to reach out beyond the blue dot, and we are. With regard to behavioral health, Army leadership has been instrumental in reducing the stigma associated with asking for help. In Army medicine, we recognize that to overcome the stigma, we needed to make our behavioral health care teams more accessible. Not only do we offer behavioral health services to our hospitals and our clinics, we're reaching outside the traditional settings and closer to our patients and their families, and we're reaching into the life space. We're synchronizing and coordinating resources with Installation Management Command and our senior mission commanders. We are well into the process of embedding behavioral health assets into our units, soldier-centered medical homes, patient-centered medical homes, schools, and communities. We're building community-based clinics so that health is located where our families live. In collaboration with the Fisher Foundation, we're standing up 11 National Intrepid Center of Excellence centers that will synchronize behavioral health and concussive care. We're standardizing the delivery of pain management so that it's standard across our medical centers and our community-based clinics, and we're also adding integrative medicine and alternative medicine to that whole continuum of being able to treat pain. We've chartered a women's health task force to look at women's health issues, from policies to protective personal equipment to deployment health support and redeployment programs. We're leveraging telebehavioral health and telenarrative summaries to increase our capacity in the disability evaluation service and be able to leverage behavioral health more towards prevention. In Afghanistan, we are now having, over this last year, telebehavioral health to some of our most remote COPs and FOBs to be able to have that capability present so that they can deal with the concerns and the issues of what they just experienced prior and not waiting until they get home to deal with those challenges. We're focusing our efforts on standardizing the entire patient care experience. And finally, we're continuing to utilize social media and the internet to reach out to soldiers and to families. If you will allow me one more video clip, I'll ask for lights, please.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.
We too are rebuilding. We're rebuilding and strengthening the health of our soldiers and families who have answered the call of our nation for the last 11 years with an all-volunteer force. We're rebuilding our Army, and we're rebuilding America. General Odierno frequently states, "The strength of our nation is our Army. The strength of our Army is our soldiers. The strength of our soldiers is our families. And this is what makes this Army strong." I am humbly reminded each day that the injuries on the battlefield impact the lives of our soldiers, sailors, airmen and Marines, their families and the units, and the communities that support them. Despite these injuries, individuals and families can and they do recover. Communities transform and they unite, and the fabric of America binds tighter. Our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren will judge our generation on how we responded to psychological and physical effects of war on those who have faithfully served their nation. I cannot thank you all enough for being those that have supported our families, our soldiers, and the community's engagement over these last 11 years. We have a long way to go, but I believe we're moving on the right journey, and the way that we'll do this will be binding each and every one of us together with our capabilities to make just not our Army strong, but our military strong and our nation strong. So with the last thing I'd like to say is Army Medicine is honored to serve and proud to serve. So thank you very much, and I entertain any questions that you may have.
We've been doing virtual delegates this year, and we have an audience of them as we speak. And this question came from Fort Bliss. There are several programs for our soldiers in regards to behavioral health, but I am seeing the programs being so overwhelmed that it takes soldiers over a month to get help. I personally know a soldier that was on the verge of the end and could not get help no matter how hard he tried. What efforts are being put into making this better?
Thank you very much for the question. We have spent this last year really looking at what is the demand for capabilities that we needed. So there's several things that we've done. For behavioral health, we've overhired behavioral health in the areas where we could actually hire them, because there's a national shortage on behavioral health providers. So we've overhired them at each one of our medical centers. We're using the internet to be able to take that capability and leverage it to some of the more remote areas, the areas where it's harder to hire those capabilities. We're also using the entire behavioral health team, so we're increasing our hires, not just in psychiatrists and psychologists, but also social workers and nurse practitioners. So we want to use the full complement on that. The other thing that I think that we're doing is as we move towards prevention, that will decrease the demand on the behavioral health system so that we can get more towards wellness and then less that are needing the actual behavioral health care. And we've embedded those in our primary care so that as people are coming in just for basic appointments, we also have behavioral health that are embedded in there as well.
We also now have a question from the audience, and what we actually did was we instructed them to write their questions down on a card.
Okay.
But I think after this question, we will open it up to the audience in the room so that you can have a bit of an interaction with them as well. So this question is about service dogs. I paid to have my dog trained as a psychiatric service dog and was prescribed by my military psychiatrist and psychologist. However, as a result of the Medcom policy, I was called into an office and told to take my dog home. As a result, I was forced to request retirement, as giving up my service dog was not an option. I am convinced that I would not be alive today if it was not for my service dog. What, if anything, is being done to assist warriors with PTSD and TBI to be able to train their dogs or receive a service dog?
Okay. Okay, thank you. There has been a lot of work that has been done with regards to service animals and then the use of service animals for emotional support and behavioral health support. One of the things that we had to do across Army Medicine is to have a policy that was standard across the board that allowed us to make sure that we were providing the best and safest dogs possible to meet those disability needs. So one policy did go out that was very consistent with the same policy that the Veterans Affairs, because as people leave active duty, we've got to make sure that in the VA they're able then to support the needs of that service dog and our veterans. So that was one rationale behind the policy. What we're looking at right now, we do have therapy dogs where we use those dogs for emotional support to be able to help our service members that are on active duty right now. When someone is assigned a service animal, that actually means that they're going to be going through the disability system, because it's a permanent animal that will be assigned to them. So when we have individuals that are assigned service animals for either behavioral health or for a physical disability, then they then do enter into the disability process, and they will go through that. And so we do have emotional support dogs and a policy to support that will allow for those animals to be used, but they don't fall under the same category and the same rules that apply to a service animal. So if you're in this audience, if I didn't answer that question to your needs, just please raise your hand and let me know. Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, General Horo. Christy Kaufman, Code of Support Foundation. You've mentioned the challenge that we have in getting enough providers, both for the service members and the families. What are we doing in regards to looking at organizations that are already doing this, that are outside the gates, whether they're a nonprofit like Not Alone or Give an Hour, or some of the existing support that veterans and family members can use if they knew about? I think that's the big gap of looking outside of the resources that DoD provides, because we can't fill the need at this point. So can you talk about how we can move forward in looking at some of the barriers that keep that from happening?
Mm-hmm. Actually, we've very aggressively over this last year have been reaching out to the other organizations, and we've made contact with Give an Hour. They have over thousands of behavioral health providers that are donating their time to be able to support the behavioral health demand for our service members. And so there's work being done with them. We've also worked with Congress this past year. They just passed the STEP Act, and what that does is it will allow credentialing and privileging across state lines. And so what that will allow us to do is to be able to use the internet and tap into the wealth of talent that we have across the United States to really support, and I would say even more so, our reserves and our National Guard that need that support in some of the most remote areas. And so we've been looking at this through a policy perspective, through legislation, as well as partnering with a lot of our community leaders and then overhire. We have doubled the amount of our behavioral health providers on active duty to support the increased demand, because I believe as you decrease the stigma and you make it more comfortable for people to seek behavioral health care, the demand is going to go higher. But in addition to that, our embedding of behavioral health into the units is a way that we're actually getting people to feel more comfortable seeking care, and we're seeing positive outcomes on decreasing the stigma, on increasing the health, decreasing inpatient admissions due to behavioral health, just by having that capability embedded in the brigade combat teams and their units. And so we are actually funded for $50 million to roll that out, and we've been rolling it out aggressively.
I have a question from a virtual delegate at Fort Hood. And this delegate says, how can we reach the family member with suicidal issues? What are the statistics on the family member suicide rate?
You know, and speaking for our Army senior leaders, because we've spent a lot of time talking about this, and we all really believe that in order for us to tackle suicides, I think we have to focus more on resiliency and more on the prevention. And what we found is when we look at every single suicide that occurs, over 80 to 85% of them had a relationship issue. So either a failed marriage, a failed dating relationship, failed relationship with parents, or a failed relationship with their units. And so if we can focus on that community involvement, if we could focus on increasing the resiliency and having that ingrained in everything that we do. And so part of General Odierno has really looked at is our resiliency and readiness campaign plan, and that is forcing that capability into our day-to-day interactions within our units. And so we're increasing the number of master resiliency trainers. We're pushing more of our capabilities into the units. We've got a soldier leader risk reduction tool that we actually just rolled out when we had our suicide stand down on 27 September. And what that does is it doesn't identify who's at risk. More importantly, what it does is it forces a conversation from our squad leaders and our platoon leaders with our service members. Because what we want to have happen is we want people to get that personal connection, to know who's having marital problems, who's having financial problems, who's having stressors at work, and then be able to get them into the large number of resources that we have out there. The other thing that we're doing to be able to tackle this is developing a commander's dashboard. And what that will allow us to do is our commanders will then have visibility by individual in their unit of who's having challenges, who's needing support, and as they move from one installation to another, that information doesn't get lost, because that's where a vulnerable part is when you lose that unit support from one place to another. And so that dashboard is connecting information from CID, it's connecting information from traffic violations, risky behavior, behavioral health. It's HIPAA compliant, but what it allows them to do is to really build that relationship. Yes, sir.
Ma'am, my name is John Freudenberg. I'm the Government and Military Affairs Liaison with the Partnership for Children of Cumberland County. We sponsor a conference every year called the Forward March Conference. It's a predominantly behavioral health related conference, but we bring in educators and law enforcement and a number of different organizations and individuals. And that conference was just held this past Thursday and Friday, and we had as our closing plenary speaker Command Sergeant Major Chris Farris. He's the Command Sergeant Major with SOCOM. And he talked about barriers to behavioral health, and of course, you know, stigma being the one that's the most spoken of barrier. But he also mentioned barriers in terms of a lack of understanding of military culture and combat experience among our behavioral health professionals. And it got me thinking. My former life, I was a caseworker, and it's something that I heard very often is from service members that they didn't feel comfortable going to speak to somebody who they basically had to bring up to speed on where they were coming from. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, especially in these economic times, that with soldiers and service members transitioning out of the military, that there's an opportunity to encourage some of those members to go into the behavioral health field so that those barriers could be overcome. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on if there was any way the Army could encourage members soldiers to go into the behavioral health field.
If I could answer two parts of your question, because you actually raised an issue that we have been looking at. There's a program that has actually been tested at Walter Reed over the last couple years and then also utilized at Fort Meade. And that is, how do you train our behavioral health providers so that they have the military cultural sensitivity? And as I told you, we've doubled the amount of behavioral health providers. So we're drawing from the civilian sector to bring in a capability, but they don't necessarily have that understanding of the military. So we're looking at what are the right training programs that allow us to onboard individuals. So that's one thing. The second thing is to address that is really embedding our military personnel into the units so that they have that understanding, because those same behavioral health providers in the units will be the same behavioral health providers that actually deploy with those units, and then the civilians that have that habitual relationship with them. The other thing that we've done is Uniformed Service University has actually started a couple years ago for us a training program to develop psychiatric nurse practitioners. And we've had a lot of our enlisted medics actually are getting funded educationally to go back to school, to go into the behavioral health. So we are trying to aggressively look at this from all different dimensions.
And I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
Ma'am, you talk about master resiliency training for families, and I'm currently taking one at my local ACS, and I'm enjoying it quite much. However, the training itself is geared towards soldiers. The language is not family-friendly. Can we rework the curriculum so that it's more focused on families when we're training our families?
Okay. I will take that back to the team. They actually just changed the title because they got feedback when it had comprehensive soldier fitness that families didn't feel included in it. And so we've got families into the title, and I'll go back and share that with them.
It's 11 hours.
So I will take that back. Okay, thank you. Okay. That's from on high. I think it's time to end.
Well, I just want to thank Lieutenant General Patricia Jorge for her amazing, first of all, the wonderful words. Those images were so powerful. And also, just because you're doing such a fantastic job, we know how much you care. We know how much you care, and it shines right through. I'm going to come up on stage for just a minute because you had agreed to help us with a little something. But again, please join me in a round of applause to thank General Jorge. And now we are going to actually be recognizing our first runner-up family of the year here up on stage, and General Jorge has agreed to help us do just that. So could we get the the Rivera family up? Oh, the kids are not with you yet? Well, she'll get them. You guys come on up because I'm just going to say a little bit of something about you. And we've got Chief Warrant Officer 4, Israel Rivera. His wife, Sandra, is with us. And as they're getting the kids, who are absolutely adorable, I just want to say that we could not be able to recognize our families the way that we have without the help of our amazing sponsors. And I would actually like to invite Nancy Gilbride up on stage with us as well. She is the Vice President and General Manager of Federal Pharmacy Services Division of Express Scripts, which, as many of you know, is our mail order pharmacy company. Thank you so much. And we are going to just wait a little bit longer. So let me just tell you a little bit about the Rivera family. If you all want to kind of go center stage a little bit more so you can... The Rivera family was nominated by the Lee chapter through the by Fort Lee through the Robert E. Lee chapter in Virginia. They have subsequently PCS to Sembach, Germany, where CW4 Rivera is currently assigned to the 18th MP Brigade. I have to tell you just a little story. When we called to congratulate them, we couldn't find them. So we started to panic just a little bit, but they fortunately went out all over and said, they're in Germany, we found them. So they've traveled all the way from Germany and have been here only for about a couple of days. So they're just starting to get their sea legs under them, I think. The Rivera family is receiving a wonderful gift basket. From Express Scripts, as well as a check for $1,000 from Express Scripts as well. So Nancy. This family is an amazing family, put it in countless of hours of volunteer time, both at their Fort Lee community and now also over in Germany. They, all four of them contribute very, very much to many different organizations, their family readiness groups, and the kids are always available to help babysit, to help support anything that their parents have asked them to get involved with. So I was wondering if, did you? No. So I think we just want to give the Rivera family a round of applause. And thank General Jorge for helping us make the presentation. I have one last presentation to make, and that is to our sponsors. Without them, we just could not do what we do. So thank you so much to Express Scripts for their loyal support. And this concludes our morning ceremony. I hope that you'll return this afternoon at 2 for forum number 3. It's going to be just as amazing. Everybody was phenomenal. Please help me and give everybody another round of applause.